Hello and welcome to In Conversation With, the monthly podcast series brought to you by the team that produced the Global Cosmetics newsfeed. 2023's theme is circular cosmetics. This month's topic is hair care, and I'm your host, Siobhan Murphy. The road to a circular cosmetics industry is fraught with challenges on both the manufacturing and the consumption sides of the equation. One only has to look at the hair care category to understand that 80% of waste is produced by the consumption, not production. As gatekeepers to the industry, how can production, R&D, marketing, and retail teams work in tangent to mitigate the hair care category's environmental footprint? To help me answer these questions and more, it is my pleasure to introduce this month's panel. A warm welcome to Audrey Wesson, Corporate Sustainability Manager at INOLEX. A warm welcome back to Mallory, Huron, Beauty and Wellness Strategist at Fashion Snoops. Hello to Dr. Terence Chung, founder of FRUU. And welcome back to Anna Brightman, co-founder of UpCircle Beauty. Welcome, everybody.
Morning.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Mallory, let's start with you. What are the consumer challenges Fashion Snoops have been tracking, and where are the opportunities for the circular hair care category?
Well, the biggest consumer challenge that we're currently tracking now is really, this changing of habits. I think consumers want to be sustainable. We know from statistics and studies, they want to be more sustainable, but with hair care, there's a real barrier to changing those lifelong habits. So particularly we see this in the form of waterless hair care, which of course, from a beauty trend standpoint, we've seen waterless hair care bars just completely evolve from a kind of product that consumers weren't sure about. They might not have been as good quality. So now we're seeing truly amazing waterless hair care options. So we love the brand Super Zero, for example. They're really on par with salon level hair care, but consumers still have this barrier to wanting to adopt them in place of these big liquid bottles. There's something about having this giant bottle of shampoo or conditioner that feels like a value, as opposed to these small bars, which of course we know equate to these larger liquid products and actually constitute more of a value, but consumers still haven't, fully absorbed that message. Other consumer challenges to changing habits are, of course, refill stations. We've seen brands try and incorporate refillable products, not only in retail situations, but also refill services like Loop and pairing with them for easy mail delivery of refill products. And also other switches like powder form dry shampoo is another one that we're seeing from a trend perspective. Brands like Michelle dry shampoo, it's incorporated in the brush and trying to phase out these aerosol formulas that stick to the scalp, that actually absorb more than ordinary sprays. And so that is probably the biggest challenge facing consumers in terms of upcycled hair care, is just changing their habits. I think the second one would, of course, be the issue of greenwashing and misinformation. This has been rife within hair care, of course. We saw a few years ago, The Ordinary actually, when they debuted their hair care line, they had this whole pro-sulfate campaign that was all about, educating consumers about how sulfates aren't necessarily bad for your hair, and that pendulum had swung too far in one direction. And so I think there's still a lot of confusion on the consumer side. What is good, what isn't, what is sustainable, what isn't, especially when some of the studies do change from time to time. It does leave the consumer questioning what is the best thing to do. So I think in regards to those challenges, the opportunity here is certainly more education. Really getting out there, educating consumers, in fun ways that are going to speak to them, about how, things like these bar form hair care, they are actually going to save you money. They're better for travel. Teaching them about how much, using 3 or 4 or 5 cans of dry shampoo over the course of the year, how that aerosol effect lends to the atmosphere. Like, what is the impact? How can you be a better consumer and steward of the environment and still keep your hair looking great at the same time? I think consumers want to do good. They just need that push and that education to change their habits and adopt cleaner routines.
And at INOLEX, Audrey, what are the consumer challenges you're discovering with regards to formulation?
I think it's really similar to what Mallory said about the adoption of new techniques. And the opportunity that we see and explore at INOLEX is really how ingredients can take over that aspect of circularity and kind of do a lot of the sustainability work for you when consumers might be hesitant to change their routines or change to a new format. So really looking at what ingredients you formulate with and whether they have an impact at the end of life on, let's say, the water systems as they're rinsed down the drain, which is, of course, so important or relevant to hair care, making sure you're formulating with ingredients that are biodegradable, that are non-toxic to aquatic life. So as our products are rinsed down the drain, whether they're treated by a municipal wastewater system or, by a well or septic system in your homes, either way, that end of life part of the formulation is not doing more harm on the environment. So I think there's certainly this product formulation type way to address circularity that we definitely have to get over that hurdle of consumer adoption and make the product either fun or beneficial to the consumer. I totally agree with what Mallory said about, consumers say they want to go more sustainable. And then when there isn't something in it for them, it feels like a sacrifice to use a different type of product. So yeah, I really think there's an opportunity for the ingredients to be kind of the powerhouse of the sustainability of a formulation, and at least make sure that is covered before you move on to kind of try and address that format or in-use aspect of the product.
Talking about making products fun, Terence, what are the challenges for your brand FRUU?
I think it's quite hard sometimes to really communicate like sustainability and sort of conscientiousness in terms of our consumer behavior, and also match it with fun, because it kind of triggers like different neural pathway in terms of when consumers are making that decision. So in terms of what we're trying to do is, try to use really colorful packaging to really engage with customer from a sort of visual perspective when they see our product on the shelf. And then the second part is hopefully incorporate some of that sort of education behind what we're trying to do from circularity and sustainability sort of aspect, and that piece don't actually always get through, because most customers, I would say probably 70 to 80% of customers are still in their mass market stage, where they're much more cost conscious and have much less understanding about what is really sustainable. Most customer, even the most educated one right now, are only still stuck at a stage where they think sustainable means natural rather than sort of circular ingredients. And they still stuck at a stage where, synthetic are probably worse for our environment, but they don't fully appreciate what are the hurdles and why there are certain sort of grades of difference in terms of why this ingredient is slightly more sustainable but not fully sustainable, and even stretching that understanding to how these ingredients can contribute to waterway pollution, etc. Like others are saying about how the real challenge is not just where we're sourcing these feedstock from and how we're making them, but also how they're going to be degraded, which a lot of ingredients, especially the new circular ingredients that's coming up to the market, there's still very limited study in terms of how they would actually be degrading in soil, in water, waterway, etc. So those are a lot that need to be sort of catching up in the next couple of years. But I think the hardest thing when it comes to circular hair care is replacement of silicone, which probably no one really want to completely face, but silicone is like magic ingredients that we just have not found a true replacement. So anytime a consumer is picking up our products, using it, and it's supposed to be sustainable partially because there's no silicone, and then therefore they realize actually a product performance doesn't match with whatever they were used to be using. and then they switch back, which is, that's the number one challenge in terms of circular hair care in general, is how do we solve the silicone performance problem, and how do we introduce other ingredients like cationic and sort of chemically derived ingredients that is cost competitive comparing to whatever that we are already using. So that's a lot of the sort of conscious sort of selection process for the customer. It's not going to be down to cost, because so much of the circular ingredients are so much pricier than whatever is in a bottle on a shelf right now. But yeah, that's kind of our understanding at the moment.
And at UpCircle Beauty, Anna, what are the challenges you've been tracking and how are you solving them?
Well, as you're probably aware, for UpCircle, circularity has been our complete focus since the very beginning in every single product that we make, from both the ingredient sourcing perspective, but also the packaging as well with our packaging return scheme. Launching into the hair care category has definitely been an ambition of ours, but it's taken us, close to 7 years to reach this really exciting point that we're at now, where we are finally launching with an absolutely fantastic product into hair care, which is, of course, circular. But it's because there have been lots of challenges that it has taken us this long to do that. So I think at the start, Mallory was talking about the issue of water in hair care, and that being a major challenge. And to be honest, that was one that we really wanted to make sure we did tackle in whatever product we did release. And so for years, we were formulating, or attempting to formulate, should I say, shampoo and conditioner bars. Now, there are lots on the market, but the vast majority of them are formulated with palm oil, which is something our brand is completely free from. And the other thing that we find when we talk to customers is that shampoo bars are not really suitable on all hair types. It's pretty challenging, or we've certainly failed, to create a shampoo bar that is going to be just as good on short, straight hair as it is on curly hair, as it is on afro hair. So as Terence was discussing, what's often the challenge is that people try a natural, sustainable hair care product, but the performance doesn't match up, and therefore they are almost forced to go back to the less sustainable or ethical versions of hair care products that actually perform better. So we've taken time to really make sure that whatever product we put out there is just as good in terms of the performance as the less ethical products that are on the market. But that it has to be innovative. I think that's something that we've always taken great pride in as a brand, is making sure that the products that we're producing are truly different to what's already available on the market. So the product that we will be releasing in March of this year is a shampoo creme, which is a hybrid of liquid and solid. So it's a very unique and innovative concentrated formula that delivers 3 times the washes of a traditional liquid shampoo. Its mousse-like consistency uses 50% less water than your average liquid shampoo, meaning that rather than sort of a large dollop that you might usually use as your kind of serving size as such, you only use a blueberry-sized amount for average to long hair. There's, of course, also less waste than a shampoo bar due to the fact that almost always with shampoo bars, those last slithers always end up being discarded or just slipping out of your hands and going down the drain. So this is the sort of product that we're hoping that once you use it, you really won't ever go back to a liquid shampoo. The fact that, of course, it's in a concentrated formula also means that it's 50% less in terms of its weight, and therefore less carbon emissions, which is, of course, always a top priority for us as well. Packaging is completely plastic free and, of course, refillable with our industry-leading packaging return scheme. So it's something that we're really proud of. Of course, circular packaging, circular ingredients. So it's got upcycled pink berry extract in it, which is a fantastic ingredient, which is clinically proven to reduce scalp irritation as well. So I think, as with all products that you bring to the market these days, the industry is highly competitive. Consumers are only getting more educated on what it is that they want to use and will use from both an ethical and a performance perspective. And with the cost of living crisis, it's also important that costs are kept as low as possible without sacrificing any of those values either. So for brands, it's really, really hard to check every single box at the same time. But that's why I think these things do take time, and you have to be willing to start again and continually refine, despite the pressure that you might be receiving from customers to launch a product. We tried for years and years and years with different formats to produce a hair care product, but ultimately we just weren't satisfied that it was inclusive and suitable for everyone, which an UpCircle product always has to be. So yeah, lots of challenges along the way, but ultimately I think in order to bring something to market, you have to be confident that the product that you produce checks all of those boxes at the same time. So yeah, it's a very exciting time for our brand as we launch into the hair care category for the first time.
And bringing something to market, Mallory, what are the digital challenges that Fashion Snoops have been tracking, and where are the opportunities for the circular hair care category?
Well, I think certainly one of the biggest opportunities, just from a pure ingredient standpoint, is really leveraging blockchain technology to be a huge influence on where your ingredients are coming from, how ethical they are, how they're being sourced, how they're traveling up the supply chain, and really identifying ingredients and sourcing issues that can be solved to maximize sustainability. And also, in relation to that is also optimizing efficiency of shipping using technology and tracking. It's just so interesting because, even a few short years ago, consumers were neither really much aware of, nor did they care about where ingredients were specifically being sourced, or what are the shipping, what is the shipping like? It's grown slowly. Consumers, of course, for several years have been keeping track, but I think recently we've hit max educated consumer, and also technology has aided in the educated consumer of helping them see exactly how, behind the scenes and how their ingredients are sourced. So I think really tech is exposing in many ways a lot of the process behind the creation of consumer products, and they really are looking for products that deliver sustainability efforts and initiatives in every step of the way. I think another huge challenge from a tech perspective is a simple need to design styling tools that use less energy and also solve waste problems on both a consumer and a salon level. We've seen some, encouraging progress in this area. 2 years ago at CES, there was a great product introduced by L'Oreal, the L'Oreal Water Saver. It's a sustainable hair care system for salons that helps to reduce water waste, which is a huge issue for salons. So I think really focusing more on these specific issues and where within the hair care industry, both consumer facing and salon level, we can reduce waste is a huge area of improvement from that tech can help solve. I also just think from the tech perspective, just speaking to the effect of social media in the consumerist standpoint, I think we've really hit peak consumerism that's being fueled a lot by TikTok right now. In fact, there's been so much that there is now a backlash that they're calling the de-influencer movement. And, Anna just spoke about the pressure to launch, and this is something that social media really fuels for beauty brands. Fans come into comment sections all the time. When are you launching this? When are you launching that? And I think, taking a stand and, as she mentioned, standing by your ethics as a brand and really taking the time to develop a product right and for the right reasons is really important, and using all the technology at one's disposal to really create a product that, is the brand can be confident about standing by, as well as sending out to consumers, for sure is an opportunity within the tech space.
And at INOLEX, Audrey, what are the digital challenges and where are the opportunities for formulating the circular hair care category?
I think there's always a challenge with communicating sustainability, whether it's in formulation or ingredients. And this is really because of the digital landscape, in my opinion. The way people are consuming information is really quick and short and oversimplified oftentimes. And sustainability is not quick and is not very simple. So to really communicate the sustainability benefits of one ingredient over another, one formula over another, requires a longer attention span than I think we often have from consumers, or even in B2B marketing, on how we are just used to consuming information really quickly. So I think that is really one of the biggest challenges, which, is more on the communication side than digital, but I really think it's because of our, digital landscape. Especially when we talk about circularity, which I would consider even a subset of broader sustainability. I think we're really prone to misusing this term or overusing it or not educating our own industry and then consumers on it properly before it gets used and overused and again oversimplified. So I really think with this topic, as an industry and with the leaders in circularity that are here on this call, it's so great to have this discussion and really to be able to kind of hone in on what are the elements of circularity that we should be embracing and take that into the digital media landscape to make sure that we're agreed upon a definition and not kind of trying to oversimplify the aspect of sustainability that's really quite hard to incorporate into ingredients and formulation.
So how does your brand FRUU deal with these challenges in the digital space, Terence?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what we're trying to do a lot more is trying to educate customers in terms of specific reason why we incorporate certain ingredients, which obviously most brands are doing as well. And I think I do agree with how difficult it is to really communicate cosmetics and the science behind it, as well as the sustainability sort of credential behind every single ingredient, and even different manufacturing sort of processes, how we develop them, and product format and packaging, and all of that together makes it an incredibly hard piece in terms of education. Because if you just think about most Gen Z and teenagers, they're just so involved with the likes of TikTok and Instagram Reels, where most of their attention only the longest is somewhere between 3 to 5 seconds. So to really be able to communicate scientifically accurate messages that is useful to the end user is incredibly difficult. And especially when it comes to hair care as well, there's quite a lot of conflicting messages about certain ingredients. For example, sulfate, which we already mentioned. Silicone is still a debatable one in terms of its sustainability credential and how it's perceived in a customer space. But these type of messages is also very hair specific as well. So if you say one product works for this type of hair, it's also very going to work very differently in our type of hair. And I think the hair colorant industry is probably the biggest sort of elephant in the room in terms of how no one's really talking about the sustainability profile and how much damage it's potentially causing when it's released into a waterway. And it's pretty fundamental to also the hair salon industry as well. And that's why no one's sort of prepared to really challenge that. But much of the chemical reagent that they're using are synthetic, and they can be very harsh in terms of what it's doing to the hair as well as to your scalp as well. A lot of people losing hair as a result of them using these type of reagents. But overall, yeah, there's just not much progress at all in terms of how we're willing to potentially shift the hair dyeing and hair treatment industry into not even talking about circular, but just thinking more about how can they use more sort of sustainable and renewable chemicals that's not going to cause environmental damage. But and message is most of the content that's out there that's trending, they're viral because of algorithmic sort of advantage that certain content has, because they're eye-catching, they are fun, but not necessarily because they're true. And therefore these type of content can perpetuate a lot of misunderstanding about the industry and about specific products and packaging. And it's actually potentially going to cause more damage than what benefits they're bringing.
And for your brand UpCircle, Anna, with the launch of a new product, What are the challenges and where are the opportunities in the digital space?
Well, as I mentioned, it's a really exciting time for us because this represents us going into a brand new category. We are first and foremost a skincare brand. We make skincare products and then skincare accessories that you might use alongside your skincare routine, like an under eye roller or a gua sha stone, that sort of thing. But this is our first hair care product. So we are looking at our strategy a little bit differently, and we're a couple of months away from launch now. So at the minute, we're very much in a kind of information gathering phase where we are fueling out the product in its kind of sample form to people who know better than us, to be completely honest. So salons, senior hairstylists, people like that, to get testimonials that we can then turn into digital ads. So digital marketing is by far our biggest cost, but also our biggest opportunity for marketing our brand generally. So we, primarily that would be through social media advertising. And what is social media advertising? Well, at the moment, it's largely TikTok style reels and in video form, as multiple people on the panel have already discussed. Like Terence said, the attention span is under 10 seconds. So how on earth do you deliver all of the messages that you want to about a product which is truly differentiated and doesn't exist on the market as is? How do you educate to convince people in basically no time that they should trust that your product, despite being ethical, vegan, certified cruelty-free, B Corp, etc., all of these fantastic credentials, is also as good, if not better, in terms of performance? Because I think ultimately that's the challenge, is that there's a lack of trust about the performance of circular and ethical products generally. So we are going down the classic TikTok style in our strategy of identifying what the hook is and using kind of shock tactics, really. What's your problem? What's your solution? So is the problem that the lather that's produced by natural products isn't good enough? Does it make the hair feel lank? Is it lightweight enough? Does it promote hair growth? Is it stripping? Does the hair hold when it's been styled? Does it contain palm oil, etc.? If you start your video with that problem that people usually face, then very quickly you flip that narrative and you start with an issue and then you show your product as the solution for that, and you try and do that in 5 to 10 seconds, which is certainly a big challenge. But we've been designing our first TV campaign this year as well, and we've decided to actually take the biggest skepticism about circularity and skincare and almost lead with that to show the ridiculousness of the skepticism. So we were one of the first brands to really fully put the circular economy at the front of our branding, from the brand name to the hierarchy of messaging. But everything about UpCircle is about the circular economy. So in this TV campaign that we are developing, we literally have scenes of people diving into bins, dumpster diving as such, to salvage ingredients, and then you end the ad by explaining how much value there is in those ingredients. Now, of course, the reality behind the scenes of our production is not that we are diving in bins, but what it highlights is that it's kind of a similar concept, but it's of course much more sanitary and professional than that. But if you lead with the ridiculous and then you turn the ridiculous or kind of unattractive into something beautiful at the end, then you've grabbed the attention. And it doesn't really matter if what you're showing isn't what happens. We're taking the skeptics approach. We're almost exaggerating it. And then all we really need to do is get the attention. Whether that then comes back with more skepticism, it doesn't really matter. That's marketing. And in this day and age where most marketing is digital and the attention spans are so short, the most important thing that you need to do is get people's attention. And then the education comes later, because fundamentally you can't educate on all of these fantastic things that all of us are doing, either on the packaging, which is incredibly limited. I'm talking about how our product is 50% smaller than the average because it's concentrated and has less water. That also means less retail space as such to communicate the message of what the product does on pack. That's kind of physical marketing. Digital marketing is even less generous. So Yeah, lots of challenges there, but for us, we start with the problem and then we display the solution. And we're kind of going with, I guess, sort of attention-grabbing shock tactics to spark interest in what we're doing, whether that's for the right reasons or the wrong reasons. At least it encourages consumers to investigate your brand further. They think, God, surely there's not a skincare brand that are diving into bins to get ingredients and then they expect me to put that on my face. Well, no, that's definitely not how our processes work. But if that's made you at least research how it does work, then we've succeeded.
And talking about starting with the problem and finding a solution, Mallory, what are the environmental challenges that Fashion Snoops have been tracking, and where are the opportunities for the circular hair care category?
Well, certainly one area where we see a huge opportunity for circular hair care is definitely the biotech field. Biotechnology, if you're unfamiliar, is a portmanteau of course, biology and technology, and references ingredients that are either nature inspired or nature derived, but like lab and tech take it to the next level to be a more sustainable product. So the challenge, of course, is taking this great opportunity of biotech and finding both effective and scalable biotech alternatives for unsustainable ingredients. Of course, palm oil has been mentioned a few times during the course of this conversation. That's one that biotech is really trying to find an effective and scalable alternative for, as well as squalane, of course, is another one. We've seen many plant-based biotech alternatives to that ingredient. And, you know, we're seeing chemistry and labs really take the best of nature and find more efficient solutions that truly benefit all, benefit the consumer, benefit the environment, and also benefit local communities where some of these ingredients are over-harvested and lead to terrible side effects, both from an environmental standpoint and a human standpoint. So definitely some new biotech ingredients that we're seeing pop up. We've seen recently from the UpCircle beauty company, a byproduct of hummus production. They've created an ingredient called Faba Tonic, which is for curly hair, which is interesting, speaking to that whole idea of food waste. We know that there's a wealth in waste, truly, and that food waste has become a huge consumer concern. It's also simply a huge humanitarian issue. The idea that there is such, global hunger and such global food shortages, and yet food waste is a major issue across the world. And really, the beauty industry can step in and really try and take advantage of the wealth in all this waste. Just looking at this, Faba Tonic, it's from the byproduct of hummus, a snack that's beloved around the world. And so how can we use these byproducts, these shells, these seeds, this leftover juice, whatever it is, and how can we turn that into something that is usable? And of course, these foods are so nutrient dense, and with the possibilities of biotechnology, there's so much that can be done with them, whether it's creating a synthetic alternative or fermenting them and using the fermentation process to create an entirely new active. There's just so much opportunity there. We also saw Givaudan Active Beauty. They launched Patchouli Up, which is upcycled from patchouli. So, really trying to take something that was left over after fragrance creation, taking the distilled patchouli leaves that are used in fragrance and using them to create a tonic for the scalp that can eliminate dry flakes and such. So really, speaking to Anna's point about, diving in the dumpsters, finding what we can from the food industry and using that, I think, is a great opportunity. Another huge challenge, however, is also not only what to do with the masses of plastic bottles that we see for consumer use, but also styling tools. Again, styling tools are mainly plastic and completely unrecyclable parts. And so we're seeing brands step up to try and help consumers be more sustainable in this aspect. And Styler has a recycling program where they recycle 100% of the tool for the consumer, whether it's old, unused, or non-working hairstyling tools. They take tools from other brands. They also give consumers a discount code to use for purchase. So it's a great initiative and incentive for consumers who are looking to be more sustainable. If they have a drawer full of old unused or on non-working hairstyling tools, to be able to send those back and know that they're being recycled in some fashion. Of course, we also know that salon sustainability is a huge concern. And thankfully, there are organizations like Green Circle Salons who are trying to address this. We know that there's a huge amount of waste, speaking to the point mentioned earlier, from hair salons. Some statistics from Green Circle Salons: 42,000 pounds of excess hair color, lightener, and toner is thrown away every day. 110,000 pounds of used metal, like hair foils, are thrown away. PPE waste, hair clippings. There's just a huge amount of waste, but Green Circle Salon's mission is to try and work with salons to identify these areas of waste and reduce it, ultimately bringing more value and profit to the salon itself, to the stylist. And so it truly is a beneficial for the entire ecosystem, so to speak, of hairstyling. So I think there's a ton of opportunity in this space with biotech, and also identifying those issues of upcycling and sustainability within the salon space.
And at INOLEX, Audrey, what are the environmental challenges and where are the opportunities for ingredients and formulation for circular hair care category?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of challenges in making formulations, more environmentally sustainable. One of the big areas we are seeing that is not really being widely talked about is the environmental hazards around certain quaternary ammonium compounds, which are widely used in especially conditioners. So quats such as BTAC and CTAC really aren't biodegrading at a quick enough rate, and also pose some aquatic toxicity concerns. So, moving a really core ingredient platform over to something such as a non-quat is something that's going to, face or that formulators will have to face as they want to make their formulas more environmentally conscious and sustainable. And Dr. Terence mentioned how hard it is to switch from silicone, just maximizing, the same performance without increasing your costs, maybe without wanting to change out any other ingredients. Oftentimes we kind of have to redesign the whole formula to move out an unsustainable ingredient category that's so core to the function. So I think that's going to be a big challenge. And again, I'm not really seeing as much noise about quats as maybe we should be hearing, and what the alternatives out there to switch to are. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. In terms of opportunities, I think there's a lot of opportunities in alternative feedstocks. We've talked about palm and some of the issues with palm. But there are a lot of plants out there that have much more sustainable supply chains and are just utilized in a more circular way. So for example, the coconut plant has long been utilized for every single part of the plant: the meat, the shell, the husk. If the tree is cut down, which it doesn't need to be cut down to harvest the coconut, the wood has use. So really utilizing, all aspects of a plant certainly contributes to a more circular agricultural system. We also utilize as a feedstock a lot of brassica at INOLEX. The brassica, or the rapeseed plant, really contributes to more circular processes and regenerative agriculture. It's often used as a cover crop. So in the off season of the cash crop, brassica is grown to regenerate the soil, and doesn't kind of use any additional land. You're just planting on the off season of another crop. So I think there are existing agricultural streams or supply chains that can be utilized to improve the sustainability of our bio-based products and cosmetic ingredients. I think that's a really key opportunity with, again, existing supply chains. I think there's so much innovation that's going on, as we've talked about biotech, and recreating kind of innovative agricultural feedstocks. But there's also a lot of opportunity out there in established supply chains. So really tapping into all different ways to source more sustainably, I think is really crucial and presents a huge opportunity for improving ingredient sustainability profiles and therefore formulation sustainability profiles.
And at FRUU, Terence, what are the environmental challenges for your brand?
Yeah, so I think there's been obviously quite a lot of talk about palm oil, etc. And I think it's going to be a debate that's going to go on probably for another decade, to be honest, in terms of whether palm oil can be classified as actually sustainable ingredients now that you've got a lot of different initiatives to make sure that palm oil doesn't sort of cause further exploitation and further environmental damage. And I think I hope actually the industry would kind of switch to a point where they start to understand what is truly sustainable when it comes to plant oil production, because there's been a lot of debates, especially in the past 5 years. If you just look into scientific community and people that truly are concerned about environmental footprint of plant oil, we just see that the biggest problem with this is that we consume way too much plant oil in general, and therefore we need to produce all these excess palm oil and all sorts of different oils that utilize a lot of land that originally were rainforests. And there's been numerous studies that also suggest that actually palm oil is not necessarily culprit, because it is the most oil-rich plants that produce the most oil per hectare, that uses the least fertilizers, uses the least insecticides, for example. And if you compare that to, for example, coconuts and quite a few other plants, it might actually be the most sustainable plants to produce oil, although it's causing other issues. And I think there's been a lot of focus on that because there's story piece about how it's causing orangutan sort of decimation and stuff. But there's not so much, however, story that talks about how soya is actually causing even more of an issue in Amazon, for example. So I think there has to be a much more honest and sort of transparent conversation about which oil is the most sustainable, which isn't. And if we were to switch to things like rapeseed, for example, sunflower, for example, that could potentially compete with food production, which we see so much of problem that's coming from Ukraine. And last year, when sunflower oil is being disrupted in terms of the export and how that can cause sort of other issue in terms of sort of food price growing in developing countries. So we really want to make sure that we're really doing the right thing instead of just using palm oil as kind of like a marketing thing to say, okay, we're dishing up palm oil because we try to be sustainable, because I think really the solution is much more complicated than that, and that could change as well in terms of how the feedstock supplied and how it's going to be changing throughout the years with like political issues and other issues such as how rainforest is going to be managed going forward. But other things such as quartz that Audrey was talking about, it's going to be another massive issue as well, because if we're trying to reduce and remove silicone completely, and people are not switching as a result of that, and you want to get rid of quartz, I think we have to have really good luck to get a consumer to completely switch by ditching these main two ingredients, because essentially that's the main two ingredients that supports the hair care industry for the last, I would say, 30, 40 years. And if you get rid of that, basically you're probably going to more or less Stone Age hair care, where customers are going to find their hair really knotty. And if you can persuade the customer to accept that, then maybe we can achieve true circularity in hair care. But if we can't, then we're really always going to struggle. So I think at that point, that means government intervention is going to be required. But it's almost like the same as the use of fossil fuel, for example. Can you suddenly legislate and go, we're going to stop using fossil fuel altogether in, let's say, 10, 20 years? I think the net zero topic is still going to be a huge challenge, even though we all think we're going to achieve it. But at the moment, I think most experts would still think actually it's probably going to be quite a challenge if you just consider all the social economical challenge that we're already facing without looking at trying to address climate change and sustainability and fit it all together in a really perfect puzzle. But yeah, that's kind of our viewpoint on that.
And talking government intervention, Mallory, what are the regulatory challenges that Fashion Snoops have been tracking, and where are the opportunities for the circular hair care category?
So certainly this is an area where we're starting to see a little bit more regulations, specifically in countries like the United States that are essentially the wild, wild west for beauty regulations. And definitely as consumers become more aware of the very long-lasting and sometimes generational effects of the toxicity of certain ingredients, they're going to be advocating for their legislators to protect them. Of course, there are more global changes as well. This year, the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act that went into effect this year, that was passed by the German Parliament, also known as the Supply Chain Act, went into effect, and it really focuses on human rights issues, and its aim is to make supply chains more transparent and try and benefit both human rights and environmental protection. So again, speaking to the idea of blockchain technology, of consumers wanting to trace their products from the bottle to the very plant it was grown from, is going to make that more transparent and easier. But getting back to the idea, that issue of safety, and specifically within the US, recent studies have shown that specifically women using chemical hair straightening products have a higher risk of uterine cancer. Of course, this disproportionately affects Black women and BIPOC communities. So that we're really questioning the safety of some of these products and trying to develop standards that make it safer and find alternatives that make it safer. A huge advancement in the US came at the end of last year with the Modernization of Cosmetics Regulation Act. If you're unaware, in the United States, all cosmetics are essentially regulated under the Food and Drug Administration, which previously had very little oversight of the beauty industry, and that is beginning to change after several years of documentaries and influencers and exposés calling out how warped the system is. So essentially, there's some significant changes coming up in terms of regulation and enforcement, and taking these issues like these chemical hair straighteners and toxic baby powder, and whether talc formulas still contain asbestos, etc. I'm really trying to, tackle these issues to instill consumer confidence. And this will be more so important regulations for environmentally friendly products, because of course consumers have a high level need for trust for their products. And if it comes out that some sustainable product that's grown in popularity poses some risk or that's a huge threat to the consumer adoption of sustainable products. So I think regulation is going to be key here in instilling consumer confidence in these upcycled circular products and creating an atmosphere of trust. And so certainly, in addition, and governments could do much more, both individually and as a global collective, to come together and try and make regulations for waste, specifically with the issue of upcycling, much stronger. It's basically the onus is on individual brands themselves in many countries to just do good from the good of their own heart, or from the good of how it appears from a marketing standpoint, whichever it is. And so it would be nice to have stronger enforcement across the board in terms of fines for excessive waste, for excessive, off byproducts, for not recycling properly. We're seeing them, and they do exist in some countries, but not all. Certainly the US is one of the worst. And so I think regulations will actually be key and will be the biggest opportunity to strengthen the entire sustainability and sustainable beauty industry going forward.
And at INOLEX, Audrey, what are the regulatory challenges and where are the opportunities for the hair care category in terms of formulation and ingredients?
I think there's actually an opportunity in regulations in how, especially like the EU Green Deal proposal outlines a roadmap for developing more sustainable chemistries and utilizing more sustainable chemistries. I think looking at the product environmental footprint that it outlines is really a good opportunity for evaluating sustainability at a scientific level, and being able to kind of publish those results and speak to the environmental impact of a chemistry or a formulation. So I think there's some ways in which, regulation, even if it's not enforced yet, but just proposed regulations can really help guide the industry towards a more sustainable direction. So I see that certainly as an opportunity. I think there's a challenge in more of the safety and compliance side with some of these ideas for circularity. There's, a local refill shop in my neighborhood where you can, refill your lotions and shampoos and conditioners. And I think there's a preservation challenge that needs to be addressed with those types of models. How clean is the jar you're putting the product into? What type of water did you rinse it out with? Is there any contamination that's possible? And do you have an effective preservation system to kind of implement something like refill? Similar with the opportunity or the idea of concentrates that get diluted into water, which we're seeing more in the home care space these days than necessarily personal care or hair care. But the concept of diluting a concentrate in water, again, what kind of water is being used for the dilution, and is there any potential contamination risk? So on the compliance side, I think there's some challenges with embracing these really innovative ideas that would bring a more sustainable product to market, and just making sure that it has that safety standard of our already packaged products. Lastly, I think there's both a challenge and an opportunity as an industry, as we self-regulate a lot of the times, in coming up with a definition of upcycled. We've talked a bit about upcycled ingredients here today, or circular ingredients, and I think there's so many ways that can be defined, and that it's really going to be kind of a nebulous space until there is an agreed upon definition. We saw this with the natural trend probably about a decade ago, using the term natural or all natural or 100% natural or nature identical. There's all these different terms that had a lot of crossover of what they mean. And I think it's really, valuable to those that are developing and utilizing truly upcycled ingredients to be able to communicate that. But I think there's also a tendency to kind of overuse that term or misuse it, or use it in a way that's maybe not exactly accurate or well defined. And I think that's the responsibility of, this sort of self-regulating industry, especially in the US, to kind of determine a definition and then make sure you kind of use that according to a standard. And I think that's in the works. There's, a food organization that has been a task force that has been developing a definition for upcycled ingredients in food. So I think we need to look towards that and make sure we're adopting an agreed upon definition and not getting ourselves in an area where we're confusing consumers or kind of diluting our own message about circular ingredients or circular components or chemistries in our formulas.
And at UpCircle Beauty, Anna, what were the regulatory challenges for your new hair care product?
To be honest, people will probably get bored of me talking about this because I've been talking about it for 7 years. But the biggest challenge that we always face is the fact that we've talked about consumers becoming increasingly educated and taking more and more due diligence when it comes to who they'll purchase from. And one of the ways that that's made easier for consumers is looking for certifications. But for a brand like us that is so wholeheartedly committed to using upcycled ingredients, we are penalized from most certifications because of the complexity of our supply chains and the sort of traceability of those ingredients across the world. So we now work with over 20 different upcycled ingredients that are sourced all over the place. But depending on what percentage of those ingredients is within our overall formulations, we are almost always not able to get a certification because we can't also rely on those businesses where we have basically intercepted those ingredients and saved them at the point where those businesses would have discarded them. We would have to get all of them to be certified as well. And as most people know, particularly from the brand perspective, certifications are incredibly expensive, and they are not only an individual product by product fee, but also an annual fee. So it seems a shame for those forward-thinking, innovative brands like my own to be basically, penalized for being front runners in this space. And I think that that's something that will hopefully change. Again, I do talk about it a lot, but we're supported by lots of certifications, even though we don't have their stamps on our products. They acknowledge that it's an issue in their criteria for eligibility, and they say that they're committed to changing it, but we are yet to see change in that. So that's difficult. But it also just means that we look for other very well-respected certifications like B Corp. And don't get me wrong, that was a very challenging process as well, because they are so rigorous, which is why they are so well-respected. But just at the end of last year, we were able to finally get B Corp certification. And to put it into numbers, over 100,000 businesses have signed up for the B Corp impact assessment since its launch, which was only in 2006. It's not as kind of long-standing as I think lots of people think it is, but only 3,500 companies are actually B Corp certified, which shows really how difficult it is to become B Corp certified, which is why it's so respected. The median score for a business is 50.9, and we came out at a 96.3. So this is the sort of thing that for us proves to our customers and builds that trust and builds that transparency, which helps negate the issue that we face, which is quite a unique issue where unfortunately, yes, we are organic, but we can't put the organic stamp on our products. And it goes back to what we were talking about, which is the beauty of upcycling really, which is utilizing every single part of a plant. Every single one of our products has a unique provenance and a wonderful story to tell. But that story often is a complicated one because it's involved an entire different industry, which has nothing to do with skincare often. But we've seen a waste ingredient. We've seen a waste ingredient that has fantastic skincare benefits. We've intercepted it. We've reprocessed it so that it's suitable for use in skincare. And then it's gone through the traditional, legal stability, efficacy testing that all products that are brought to market have to go through. But yeah, in terms of regulations and things like that, that's a challenge for us that we're yet to overcome. But I'm optimistic that progress is on the way.
And talking progress, Mallory, what does it look like in 12 months' time?
Well, certainly in 12 months' time, I would hope for a few things. Firstly, I would hope that consumers begin to adopt and move more towards normalizing and incorporating a different hair care routines. As we discussed at the top of this conversation, the idea of not only waterless hair care, but even, as Anna mentioned, a concentrate. What does that change look like? The refilling issue, perhaps being more mindful about sending back the styling tools that I mentioned to a recycling program and being more proactive about that. Again, consumers do want to be sustainable, but specifically within hair care, it's a tricky area to really incorporate that sustainability. Unlike other areas like that we've seen in the skincare, for example, sustainability has been very easy for consumers to adopt. So I hope consumers will learn more, will really take to social media and learn about some of the great brands that are doing amazing work within sustainable hair care and begin to incorporate some of those changes. And next, I hope to see a little bit more progress in terms of the regulation we were just discussing, specifically surrounding toxic hair chemicals and also putting tighter regulations, speaking to the idea of certifications and who can call themselves organic or clean or green, and really taking away the idea of greenwashing, which has become rampant and has led to a ton of consumer confusion. Again, case in point, the idea that UpCircle Beauty is completely organic, but because, as Anna mentioned, of their process, they can't say that. So it's case in point of how these certifications and the consumer perception of who is a quote unquote green brand is just so warped by some of the greenwashing, and some of the greenest and most intentional sustainable brands can't technically call themselves organic. So I think some regulations and some taking away the greenwashing would be great to see in order to bolster the really great sustainable and eco-friendly hair care products that already exist and are coming out to the market. And lastly, I'm really hopeful that we'll see more biotech alternatives and more upcycled ingredients incorporated into products, along with the essential component of marketing and consumer communication initiatives that actually educate the consumer about why these swaps are important. As educated as consumers are now, sometimes there's disproportionate focus, especially within hair care, on just the packaging and not so much the formulation. Within skincare, we've seen consumers really more aware of both the issue of sustainable packaging and sustainable ingredients within. Within hair care, we've really just seen a bunch of panic around sulfates and some ingredients, but there isn't by and large a huge focus on the formulations, which of course is the product in and of itself. So I think educating consumers about, okay, so here's this ingredient that you're probably using in your hair care right now. Here's why it's bad. If you want a good alternative, here's a great sustainable brand to swap to. I think it would be a really important and progressive thing for consumers to begin to identify these little areas within their hair care routine so they can make seamless and effortless swaps that will really start an avalanche and a chain of other swaps in other areas of their lives, and hopefully on their way to a more sustainable reality.
And what does progress like for your ingredients company, Audrey?
We hope to see a lot more adoption of those non-quat cationic conditioning agents and really paired with silicone alternatives to create conditioners that biodegrade and overall have a better environmental footprint than the incumbent, quaternium and silicone-based conditioners. So I think that is a huge space where, as we get more adoption of those ingredients and can really optimize those formulas to mimic the performance of the existing conditioners, we can certainly make the category better. I think there's definitely an opportunity to really understand where our environmental impact of a formula is coming. As Mallory mentioned, the ingredients and the formulation are so key to the impact of the product. There was a life cycle analysis done a couple of years ago on shampoos and conditioners in the US market. And while the majority of the impact was determined to be from the in-use heating of the water in the shower, 9% of the impact of the greenhouse gas impact or carbon footprint of those products was from ingredients, and only 4% was from packaging. So while both ingredients and packaging need to be addressed and need to be, more sustainable alternatives need to be chosen, certainly the focus on ingredients we see is really important and a good opportunity to improve the overall sustainability of your formula. So I think that quantification of the sustainability impact is really crucial too, to understanding within the industry and at the consumer level what sustainable swaps really make the difference. And again, we see a huge opportunity for that within quats and within silicones.
And at FRUU, Terence, what does progress look like?
We're obviously trying to do our thing in terms of just making use of as much of these innovative ingredients that come from the likes of INOLEX in our company and create amazing products that will engage with the mass market. But I think just so much of it, although it's also sort of consumer behavior, but so much of it can also be done from an environmental level as well, in terms of just having sort of specific intensive and potentially tax rates that would give sort of ingredients company and other company that comes up with innovative upcycle ingredients and just grants to really push through the sort of investigation process behind getting these ingredients and products up to into markets, which is definitely not easy with all the sort of regulatory challenge that any products has to go through already. And yeah, I mean, the government has done all sorts of supports and grants to the electric automobile industry and to green energy, and actually historically to the petrochemical industry. So I don't see why they shouldn't start to invest more money into just thinking about how we can move into a circular economy. And also from a point of view of, I would say, much of, if you just go around and look at all of the chemists out there that's doing all these good work in green chemistry, actually much of them have gone through education system where majority of their education is completely based on fossil fuel chemistry. I mean, I've come from a science background. I've gone to many chemistry classes, and there were at the time when I went to university back in probably 15 years ago, and there's been a sci module that talks about green chemistry. It's completely optional. No one really cares about chemistry, and obviously now it's so much more important in terms of how we can transition away from the fossil fuel industry. But still, when you talk to chemistry students nowadays, most of their studies is based on whatever they've been taught in the last 30 years, which is very much still fossil fuel based. So if there's a sort of intense incentive from the education departments and the government to really push more academics and industry level movement to look at how we can boost green chemistry and how we can adopt more and more chemistry that's completely based on renewable material, even better upcycle material, that would be even better. And I think that another piece on that is also really establishing a thorough understanding about how discharging untreated chemicals can cause the waterway and sort of land and soil. We still have very limited understanding and little regards as well in terms of how sort of untreated sewage can cause the environment. And as you can see, in last summer, how much untreated sewage has been discharged. And that should be a criminal sentence for some of these water companies to be able to do that. But again, the government doesn't sort of instill strict enough regulation to stop these things from happening, to really understand how these discharges, how some of these chemicals, when they enter into a waterway, what's it going to do. So government has a lot to catch up on in terms of just bringing everyone up to speed and getting all the sort of experts from a chemistry side, from the environmental science side, to a level that we should be in order to make sure the industry is truly sustainable and circular.
And at UpCircle Beauty, Anna, what does progress look like in the next 12 months?
Oh, you'll have to ask me in about 6 months' time when our shampoo's been released, and I can tell you that it's been a brilliant success and that we have successfully educated everyone on concentrated formulas and reducing water and therefore carbon footprints, and that everyone has embraced this new format, and we've solved the issue of drying shampoo bars, and everyone is now using the UpCircle shampoo creme. And I'll say that is progress as far as I'm concerned. But for now, I'm kind of proud of some of the steps that have been taken with this specific product to go the extra mile with regards to some of the research of the upcycled ingredient itself. So, for example, I mentioned at the very start of this podcast that the ingredient, the upcycled pink berry that we use in our shampoo creme, is clinically proven to decrease redness, itching, and the appearance of flakes and scales. But we actually decided to test the ingredient on volunteers who frequently wear a hijab or helmet, because most current soothing scalp care products address scalp irritations that are triggered by biological or chemical causes. But the contribution of physical causes has recently come to light, particularly in the case of covered heads that create a confined atmosphere for the scalp. in addition, of course, to the friction. So this is the sort of attention to detail that we go into in developing our products and again, choosing to bring a product to market. And I hope that, my own brand, as well as other brands, continue to really interrogate new information and new ingredients to make sure that they are the absolute best that they can be. Similarly, we're incredibly proud of our packaging return scheme, which we launched about 3 years ago, which has grown to be one of the best in the industry and really well regarded. It's growing at the moment 20% month on month. And I think that the reason for that is because we make it really attractive for our customers. We offer our refilled products at 20% cheaper than the standard prices of buying, for lack of a better word, a virgin product, a brand new product. And the stats on the actual impact of choosing to send your empty packaging back to us to sterilize and refill for you are really impressive as well. So overall, it's 65% less energy, 70% less CO2 and 45% less water per product to return and have it refilled by us. So I think it's unsurprising really that the scheme that we've launched is growing so much and becoming really a key part of what we do as a brand. But I do get a little frustrated looking at other brands out there that are often kind of alongside us in press articles and things like that, advertising themselves as having a refill scheme, but then perhaps it's only actually eligible on one product out of 20, or it's hidden somewhere in the FAQs on their website. So they're marketing themselves as being refillable beauty, but because behind the scenes it's such a complex operation to actually bring something like that into play, they'll keep it in the small print, let's say. By comparison, we shout about it constantly on all channels, all over our website, on our socials, because I think that it's something that really, really, really can have a fantastic impact. So I do hope that we continue to see not just circular ingredients and innovation with regards to ingredient sourcing, but also innovation with regards to making refill schemes attractive to the customer from both an ease and understanding perspective, but also a financial perspective as well, because ultimately with so much going on in the world, we know that keeping costs down and keeping price point as attractive as possible is something that has to be a priority for lots of consumers.
And with that, I would like to thank my guests, Mallory, Audrey, Terence and Anna, for joining me today, and to you for listening.